They said beauty was everything, that a girl's worth was measured by how many men turned their heads when she walked by. If that were true, then Clara Dawson was worth nothing. That's what her family believed, anyway. But fate, cruel and kind in the same breath, had a different plan for the girl no one wanted. It began on a gray morning in the town of Willow Creek, where the dust never seemed to settle, and dreams always cost more than anyone could afford. Clara was 17, quiet and modest, her brown hair always tied back, her face unpainted, her dresses plain. She didn't shine like her younger sister, Lydia, whose golden curls and dimpled smile made every man stop to stare. Their mother often sighed when she looked at Clara, as if wondering how she could have birthed something so ordinary. When the Dawson farm fell into debt after a year of drought, Clara's father became desperate. He had tried everything, selling cattle, pawning tools, even pleading with the banker, but the numbers still didn't add up. That's when a wealthy rancher from the neighboring county, Mr. Briggs, arrived with an offer. He needed a wife. Not for love, he said, but for companionship and to keep his sprawling ranch in order. He was willing to pay handsomely. Her mother's eyes lit up, not with concern for her daughter, but with calculation. But when Briggs arrived to see Lydia, the one they had prepared with ribbons and rouge, he surprised them all. His eyes, cold and assessing, drifted to the background where Clara stood clutching a basket of apples. Her, he said simply, pointing. The quiet one. Her mother gasped. Lydia laughed. Clara froze. Sir, you must be mistaken, her father stammered. She's not the pretty one. I'm not buying a painting, Briggs replied. I'm looking for someone real. And just like that, Clara was sold, for a sum large enough to save the Dawson farm. Her parents didn't even say goodbye. Lydia only smirked and whispered, maybe now someone will finally notice you. As the carriage rolled away, Clara pressed her hands together to keep them from shaking. She wasn't going to cry. Not for people who had treated her like a burden. But she couldn't stop the ache in her chest, the question that looped endlessly in her mind. Why me? The Briggs ranch stretched across miles of golden grass, with mountains rising in the distance like ancient guardians. It was beautiful, but lonely. Mr. Briggs was a man of few words, his face weathered from years under the sun, his hands calloused, his eyes deep with something she couldn't name. He didn't speak to her much that first week. He gave her space, meals, and work to do. Clara expected cruelty. She expected to be treated like property. But what she got instead was silence, and strange kindness. One morning, she found him repairing a fence, blood seeping from a fresh cut on his hand. Instinctively, she ran to fetch clean cloth and pressed it gently against his skin. He didn't pull away. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the wind, the rustling grass, even time itself. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and said softly, "You've got the calmest eyes I've ever seen." It was such a simple thing to say, yet it broke something open inside her. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. Not as someone plain, or unworthy, but as someone seen. Days turned into weeks. Clara learned the rhythm of the ranch, the creak of the barn doors, the scent of horses, the way the light hit the hills at sunset. Briggs began to talk more, sharing small stories about his late wife and how the silence of the house had nearly driven him mad. He never said it aloud, but Clara could feel it. He was healing, too, and in that quiet healing, something gentle began to bloom between them. But happiness, Clara learned, always came with a test. One evening, a carriage pulled into the ranch. It was her family. Dressed in fine clothes bought with the money from her sale. They came not to see her, but to beg for more. Her father claimed he'd been cheated. Her mother said Clara should convince her husband to give them a loan. Lydia, glowing with vanity, teased, "You really did luck out, didn't you? From invisible to rich man's wife." Clara's heart sank. They hadn't changed. They never would. But before she could speak, Briggs stepped forward. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "You took her for granted, and you sold her like livestock. You'll get nothing more from this ranch. He looked at Clara then, his expression softening. She belongs with me, because she chose to, not because you sold her. Her family left in fury, shouting curses as the carriage disappeared down the road. Clara trembled, tears falling freely for the first time. I didn't choose this, she whispered, her voice breaking. Briggs stepped closer, his rough hand finding hers. You didn't. But you can choose what happens now. You can stay here and make a life, not for them, but for yourself. For the first time in her life, Clara lifted her head and saw herself through someone else's eyes, not as the plain girl who wasn't enough, but as a woman with quiet strength, with a soul that had survived being unloved. Years later, people in Willow Creek would speak of the couple on the Briggs Ranch, the quiet woman and the man who never looked at another face but hers. They said he'd found beauty where no one else had bothered to look, and on evenings when the sun sank low and the wind whispered through the fields, Clara would smile, knowing the truth: beauty fades, but love that sees the soul, that's forever, because sometimes, the girl the world calls too plain is the one who teaches it what love really looks like.